Hello, everybody, and welcome on back to Corona Land. And in the search for some content, I've been suckered into Sunderland Till I Die, which, if you haven't seen, pause now and go and spend 3 hours watching on Netflix. I'm sure most of us have got it. But I was watching this documentary on Netflix, making some rough notes, thinking I'm going to review this, and then in episode number 4, who should appear but a friend of mine? And here he is. Welcome along, Graham. Just explain the shirt first for confusion.
Oh, I work for Middlesbrough ladies, so there's the long and short of it. Since Sunderland Till I Die in episode 4, I don't do very much Sunderland stuff anymore. Don't know why. And I now work for Middlesbrough ladies. But yeah, in between that clip and me where I am now, I've gone to university and I'm looking to sort of work in football media, maybe a little bit more officially. And still do podcasts now and again. But yeah, currently working with the Middlesbrough ladies team, which I fully enjoy.
So we know each other from the Roker Report. Tell us about
Yeah.
the Roker Report. You're not there anymore, but how that all parlayed into this documentary.
In short, if I remember rightly, because there's about 50 million different versions of this, because I think a lot of people think certain things with the Roker Report, and I can probably speak a bit more freely now that I'm no longer part of it. But I started with Roker Report in 2016, the David Moyes year, the wonderful David Moyes years. And basically, I only left 2 months ago, a month ago, maybe, or something like that. Now, last season, obviously, when for a long, long time, I think we would have loved to speak to people like Ella Shaw and people like that on the podcast. And sometimes a lot of the interviews were just transcribed, just over the phone. And then we got into the idea of doing podcasts, and more podcasts became popular. And kind of at the same time as our popularity, or more people listened to us, listened to the podcast, Stuart Donald took over. And it was really weird because he was one of those owners that was on Twitter. So that was already like well, hang on a minute. So we followed him, and then instantly he messaged us on the day he took over, or the night before, and he said, "Fancy doing a podcast, lads?"
Graham, this
So
is the first time I've already put my head in my hands for the next 30 minutes.
there'll
Carry
be
on,
a few.
sorry.
There'll be a few.
So
As it was,
he's approached you. You've naturally hit follow. The subject of what you cover has been taken over. So obviously you're going to follow the guy. And then he's come to you to appear on your platform.
yeah, he basically said, I think it'd be a good way to introduce myself to the fans. And speaking at the time, we'd had that, just to kind of go back to that time frame, we had Ella Shaw. Ella Shaw was, I don't hate Ella Shaw as much as some people do. I think he put his money into the wrong people, but he was reclusive towards the end, and it was
Great,
almost
Graham.
like,
I'm an Ipswich fan. Marcus Evans has spoken once in 10 years. I know
so you know what
exactly.
it's like.
Yeah.
So when the chairman follows you back on Twitter, you kind of like you shit your pants a bit. You go, all right, cool, that's sound. And then within minutes later, Gav, who's the managing editor, goes, lads, he wants to do a podcast, and we were like, when? And he's like, tomorrow. And we recorded like Sunderland University Studios. So at the time, it was Connor who was like the new host. I think Connor had done like 2 podcasts before that, and then all of a sudden he was just like, here's Stuart Donald in front of your face, and he was like,
I
crap.
I remember you getting him at the time and sort of retweeting it, thinking, "My
This is
God,
mad.
Jesus Christ!" We're going to come on to Mr. Donald and his proclivity to put himself in front of the camera and the microphone and the supporters everywhere he can. So this is the second season of Sunderland Till I Die. The first season charted the obviously the relegation from the Championship, where Short basically pulls the money out and takes the
Yeah,
parachute money and allows you to just fall right through the Championship. Obviously, we
yeah.
spoke during that season because Ipswich recorded a memorable double over Sunderland under Mick McCarthy, but I think most teams did that season, didn't they? What does it
They did.
say? I mean, I don't know whether there was a 2-season deal thing signed. What does it say about the kind of mentality of the club to have this tell-all documentary, which was at times really painful to watch the first one to then let them back in for another season?
Um, Watching it now, and I've got to be honest. I've got to be honest because I think a lot of people might look at this. Before I say this, I've got to be honest about Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven. I never really had too many bad experiences with them. Like man to man, I never had. Stuart's really like a nice, affable guy. Obviously, a bit naive, as I think few people have seen. Charlie's Charlie, but we never really didn't get on. But sometimes watching it back, I sometimes think the second one is a lot. It's still quite. It's not as fan focused as the first one, is it? So it makes me wonder: was the second one something that Charlie and Stuart kind of went, yeah, sure, no problem, in the same way that they were with podcasts and whatever, and going in with the fans and all that kind of stuff, which is nice. But I don't think there was a 2-season deal with it. I think season one did so well for multiple reasons because it
Graham,
was
just quickly,
warts and all.
trending number 4 on Netflix today this season.
I mean, you know what? There's a lot of people who are doing that whole like, I want to see you cry on Netflix, and we get it every week, and all sorts of stuff. Anything that you could throw at Sunderland fans, the easiest thing for us to say is like, where's your Netflix show? Because people can say what they want about it. I think the underlying part of all of it is seeing what it means to the fans. And as much as Charlie and Stuart might be more the stars of this show or whatever you want to call it, the fans still have that sort of. It'd be nothing without the fans, would it? Like the fans and yeah, it sucks. And trust me, like it's gut wrenching watching some of it back. And some people, Newcastle fans, Charlton fans, Portsmouth fans, whatever, might sit and laugh at it, but they're kind of welcome to. Like at the end of the day, the club I support is that big and that passionate. You can make a Netflix documentary out of it. I don't think they're going to do a third season. I actually met Leo Pearlman, the guy who I think the main guy behind Full World 73, and he's a big Sunderland fan, really lovely guy. I think a lot of it was he had a dream that he wanted to. He's done loads of stuff in America, like Saturday Night Live and all that kind of stuff. And I think he just wanted to do Sunderland because he loves Sunderland. And he was given this access by Ellis Short. And obviously Stuart Donald and Methven come along, and I don't think he would have had to beg them too much to get as much access as he did. Jack Ross, on the other hand, I think might have been a bit different. But yeah, I mean, you know what? There's that kind of fear when it came out as a fan where you think, oh God. And as soon as I knew I was in it, the anxieties washed over me. Thankfully, people haven't disliked my part in it too much.
I think a lot of people would have been cheering at your part, to be honest. But there you go. And just before we do this, so I don't come across as this is a kind of hack job, I have the utmost respect for Sunderland. When I was falling in love with football, Sunderland had Peter Reid, Kevin Phillips, Niall Quinn, brilliant battles against Ipswich. 98 playoff final, I remember like it was yesterday. And then I watched what was it, 105 points, 102 points the next.
105, yeah,
The
105.
next season. Incredible team with Johnston and Summerby and Ball and Melville and,
Alex Ray, Bridges,
yeah.
Quinn, Phillips. I could tell you the entire squad if you want.
I've got that to me is Sunderland. And
Yeah.
when they go into the first episode about the Stadium of Light, I went to the Stadium of Light. I've just done a bit with Jim Magilton yesterday. His debut was at the Stadium of Light when nobody won at the Stadium of Light, and they play that music which we're going to come on to at the start, and you would crap your pants as an away fan.
Yeah,
just
it
nobody
used to be like that.
Yeah, just nobody won there. So look, if anyone thinks I'm having a pop at Sunderland during this,
No.
I'm coming from a position of respect, and we're going to talk about the documentary. Into the first episode, Graham. First of all, the intro, don't skip it because it's absolutely stunning, isn't it? The song and the animation with the shipyards and everything. Surely, as a fan, it's quite moving, yeah.
Yeah, it's good. And I met Martin before the Checker Trade Trophy game. We had Niall Quinn and Alex Ray did a talk in at the Stadium of Light with Betak and Tom Sloans, who's now the non-executive director or something along that line. Great guy, and he did a night, and we did sort of that night on the Friday, and then we went up to London on the Saturday, and the Checker Trade was on the Sunday, and Martin was there and played live and stuff like that. Some people, funnily enough, have gone against the grain and gone like, "Oh, I don't really like it" and stuff like that. But like he's been
Unpopular
in and
opinion,
around,
yeah.
kind of, mate, yeah. But you know what? I mean, you only have to look at me to understand I'm a bit of a metalhead. But yeah, you know what? Who doesn't like an acoustic number about their home city? And he's a really lovely guy. I think we got. I got royally drunk that night on the Friday and ended up chatting to him for ages about all sorts of stuff.
Were you
He's a
slightly
really
too
lovely
close
guy.
to his face talking loudly?
He's quite small. He's quite a small guy, so it's more like even I was like leaning over him, and I'm only about 5'9" and 8 stone, when I'm wet. But lovely lad, and I think he's quite humbled by the fact that like Peter Reed tweeted today that how much he
I
loved
saw
the
that.
song, and you
Yeah,
could tell he was buzzing. Like he's a
absolutely.
nice guy, good theme tune. It's the calm before the storm kind of theme tune, isn't it, for the second
It's
season?
lovely, and well, I kept pressing skip, and I would just advise you because I think Game of Thrones has changed intros on stuff, with that thing going through all the islands, and you get these beautiful intros now, and I just thought it was really cool. This is where uh, you're in a bit of a different boat to the rest of us because for most people watching this, they don't know who these two main characters of Stuart Donald and Charlie Methven. Am I saying that right? Methven?
Yeah, Methven, the meth.
Methven.
Yeah,
Um, there's a Walter White joke in there somewhere, isn't there?
he gets called Salmon Pants up here. We call him
Okay.
Salmon Pants because he has these lovely salmon chinos.
Oh dear, he's not football fan friendly at all, is he? So look, from following your Twitter feed and your podcast, I knew a bit about these guys, but the
Yeah,
first thing, and again, they've let the cameras in, he's mic'd for sound, he knows he's being filmed, and the first thing we see is this just utterly David Brent white.
so David Brent.
Oh, it's horrible, isn't it? Whiteboard. Um, sort of trying to swear to be down with the staff, and the staff are literally rolling their eyes in front of his face. I know the edit's harsh, but how do you feel as a Sunderland fan that me as an outsider watching that, and we got an Ipswich podcast straight around the WhatsApp group. You have to watch this scene with this guy trying to turn Sunderland, from Montagues and Capulets or whatever it was into this Ibiza super club. Talk to me about the way these two characters are revealed. Did they stitch themselves up, or have they been stitched up?
That's I think, and again, I don't know Charlie that well, but I've had a few interactions with him, and again, it's always been fine. We like I had a few pints with him last year, as he had pints with everyone last year. So I wasn't special in that arena. But we chatted politics, we chatted all sorts of stuff, and he's always been fine. But that I think that is Charlie. That it like the whole like, all right, guys, I want to see a rave. I want to boom, boom, boom. And what did he say? He wanted Balearic. Was it Balearic? And you know what? I watched it and I thought, oh God, because I got a preview because of that small segment I was in it. So I was like, oh God, like people are going to see this, and this is David Brent. And then when it came out yesterday, and people are going, oh, it's like David Brent. I was like, I knew it was like David Brent. I knew this was coming, but it was, I think it is him. From my experience, it's very much that's the way like the meth is. And but you know what? It's funny. Like, I mean, I was texting my girlfriend last night, and we were chatting about it, and we were still crying with laughter. And Oscar, who's the media man, is the guy who rolls his eyes, and just the line at the end. Well, the PA system's fucked.
That could have been directed by Larry David, couldn't it? Honestly,
It's amazing.
I don't know if they've cut Charlie Meffen's reaction in, but he does this whole that you just said, that absolute punchline of well, don't really matter what you put on the PA on the system. Oh, it
And
is.
it's still broke. It's still broke. It's still shit. The PA system's still poor. It's still not good. And that's the thing. As a Sunderland fan, you watched it and probably laughed, but it's still right. Like it's still, he
Unbelievable.
was actually right in what he said. It doesn't matter what you play because the PA system is fucked. Like, just doesn't work.
Can we just do a bit of amateur psychology? Because I look at these two guys, and one's in charge and one's the front man. But Charlie seems to be this aggressive alpha male type who's in the beta position, and Stuart Donald seems to be this beta male, quite awkward. Wants to be like, but they seem the wrong way round. You would have thought that the aggressive alpha male guy would have been the owner, and the more. What's your read on that?
I felt like that for a while because obviously the first time I ever met Stuart and Charlie was that podcast that's in the show, and I did a podcast with him in the August after we just beat Portsmouth, which I enjoyed, by the way. And he was sound and he was all right. Like on his own, he was a very different person. And if you listen back to that podcast, you can hear it's quite an affable, fun chat about the start of the season and summer, and things are brought up and things are questioned. But when Charlie and Stuart are together, it's a totally different beast. And I think that's almost why the conversation that you see in the series is almost like I'm asking those questions. And the annoying thing about that podcast is it's actually edited as afterwards is a little bit where me and Charlie have a conversation about why I'm asking those questions, and I fire a bit back, which I wish they'd shown just for my own pride, to be honest. But Stuart answers that question. Stuart eventually kind of goes, "Oh, you know what, this is what I think," and he answers the question on the podcast, and he answered it relatively well. But it's a bit of it's an odd pairing because I think many people thought that they didn't speak or they don't get on. But I've got to be honest, whenever I've been in their company and or seen them, like, because they were bars all the time last year. It was crazy. They always seemed to get on quite well. I think Stuart is wonderfully naive and genuinely, like the Madger episodes when he seems just so hurt by the fact that Josh Madger's agent is messing about. You feel like you feel something with that because that's how a football fan feels. And I see Stuart, and I think Stuart's probably gone, I've got a bit of money to buy that Sunderland, and that would be pretty cool because Sunderland are like Sunderland, and it's almost Football Manager-esque. Whereas I think Charlie comes from a totally different school of thought. And Charlie is just, well, he is very David Brent, isn't he?
Well,
He's
Charlie's
very
the
David Brent.
when you put the two of them together, he's Chris Finch, isn't he? And Stuart Donald is David Brent. He's
Yeah,
the aggressive arsehole guy. Amazing stuff, Graham. Amazing. So this first episode, we get the thing with the seats being replaced. We get the glorious Charlie running around the stadium with a walkie-talkie to sound check the. And I just wrote down in my notes, this is David Brent doing sit-ups before the meeting with Neil. It's utterly pointless. Do you know what I mean? Can you just talk to me a bit about Jack Ross? Because obviously, as an Ipswich fan, it was Ipswich and Sunderland. So
yeah.
Charlie and Stuart actually outmaneuvered Ipswich to get Jack Ross at the time, and Ipswich got Paul Hurst, and they've both ended up in roughly the same place anyway, haven't they? Talk to me
Pretty
about
much.
Jack Ross and him coming in at that point.
I like Jack Ross, and it's a weird one because there'll be people, Sunderland fans especially, listening to this going, well, you wanted him out for the best part of 3 podcasts. I call a spade, and it wasn't working at the end of last season. And I think the big thing, and you can probably tell by the TV show, is when we lost Josh Madger, things just sort of fell apart, and we ruined all that money on Will Grigg. And there was an inkling for me. We were told repeatedly that Jack Ross wanted Will Grigg. That's what we were told, and he did. But as you can see in the conversation he has in the TV show, not as much as he said he did. He said, what did he say? 1.25 million. Don't go any further. And Stuart goes,
yeah,
there's 3.5.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that episode because I think Jack Ross plays that quite well in the end, doesn't he? But listen. So through episode 1, that ends with a rather foreshadowing 2-1 injury time win over Charlton in the first game. You couldn't write it, could you? We're going to episode 2, and Stuart Donald has invited the Netflix cameras into his mansion in Oxfordshire. He's dressed like Jeremy Clarkson with jeans and a shirt on and playing I Love Football, I Do. This football fans don't want to see that, do they?
You know what? I'm trying to think. I'm trying to be as fair as I can because where I sit now and what I think now compared to what I thought then is probably really different because I like Stuart. I do kind of like him. Like I don't know why,
Do you
because
like him or do you just feel empathy and sympathy for him?
I think so. I think I'm quite an empathetic person, and I always try to see people in the best light, unless they support Newcastle, which is different. But like Stuart is, he has made the wrong decisions, but he's made those wrong decisions because he wanted to get it so right. Um, but then it is part of it is comedy, and not comedy as in laughing at Sunderland. Some of it is just funny, like because it's like your dad born
Oh
in Sunderland,
no.
isn't it? Like, and but you know what, he is a likable person, especially face to face. Like I think there's been a few lies that he's told, which have suddenly, or should we say white lies? Because there's a few things came out and that you look back, if you look back far enough, you go, well, hang on, he said that and that happened. For example, Jack Ross wanted Will Grigg. It was actually seemingly Stewart that wanted Will Grigg. But yeah, I mean, bless him. I think that's how I feel about him. Bless him. That says everything, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Bless him.
I just think particularly. I mean, this is not Fulham or Reading. This with middle
Yeah.
class. So this is Sunderland with working class supporters from a steel shipyard city. I'm just not sure the
Yeah.
self-awareness is there to be in your. I know football owners are rich, but keep it away. I think was my view. You've already mentioned Josh Madger becomes the narrative of the second episode, scoring loads of goals. Agent playing hardball. We will come on to that though. Into episode 3, we get more Charlie Methven brilliance as he loves a speech to the whole staff in front of the cameras, and there's a glorious Brent moment as well of any questions, and then he says I should have planted one and nobody laughs. Again,
Oh yeah.
we don't know how that's been edited out. Talk to me about Luke O'Neill, because if anyone comes across pretty well in this documentary, he comes. He's a good TV character because he's handsome and he speaks well and he's young and he's honest. Talk to me about Luke O'Neill, and did he kind of come out of this stinking less than most other people?
Yeah, you know what? Like Luke O'Neill is universally loved at Sunderland, I think. He he's a better player than people give him credit for because he's got that. He's unfortunately sometimes got that whole. Well, he smiles and he's happy to be here and he tries really hard, but he's actually not a bad player. And he's played in about 4 or 5 different positions that he's played for Sunderland. And to be honest with you, it was the Fleetwood game before all of this coronavirus thing kicked off. We equalised against Fleetwood in the 97th minute. I left the stadium and seen him, and I'm not the kind of person that necessarily wants to speak to footballers unless I'm recording them on a podcast, because that's better. But I said, look, Luke, and he said, yeah, you're all right, mate. And we sat and chatted for 10, 15 minutes just about Sunderland and just about the game and the way he was on TV. If the way he was with me was his everyday, it's exactly the same as it was on TV. And he's a really well liked guy, and I think there's a few people that sometimes come through the door at Sunderland and get it. And the same with Newcastle, the same with Middlesbrough and all those teams. There's some people that just come through the door and just get it. And Luke O'Nine's definitely one of them. He 100% gets it. I think he could probably do a job a little bit further up for us. And I think he does come across really, really well. I think you can see his lack of ego in episode 1 when when they're changing the seats and that guy says to him, "You should sign it in case you make it one day." And the guy goes, "What?" No, Luke goes, "What?" And he goes, "Well, in case you make it one day." And then obviously, I think it's Oscar, the media guy, that goes, "Oh, he's had your life there." And he's like, "What's your name?" And he goes, "Luke." And he's like, "Luke what?" And he was like, "O'Neill." And a year later, he's like probably almost like popular player. It's just comedy watching it back. But you can see his complete lack of ego in that, and just like, "Oh yeah, my name's Luke. Like, you have just signed me, but like it's fine." Like he gets that he's nobody to that guy until he's done something. Yeah, you can probably tell by the passion in my voice. I'm a big Luke O'Neill fan.
No, he comes across really well, doesn't he? We then get through episode 3. Charlie Methven seems to make a push for an attendance record on a Boxing Day, all about himself, and this horrible exchange with the marketing girls, and rather disrespectful, in front of a camera as well. And
I think
then
so.
and then he takes the mic during the game, and like you said about wanting to be left, right, front, and centre to make the announcement. Very cringeworthy. Graham, at the end of the episode, it's really strongly intimated that the woman who, I don't want to use the word bullying on the internet, but that there's that feel, is taking
Yeah,
a box to her car. Was she fired?
I think so, but I don't know. That's kind of the indication I got from it, and I suppose, if I'm totally honest with you, I am nosy. I just don't know the right person to ask it. So I maybe should have done, but I think so. I think that indicates it. But it also could indicate the fact that maybe she left because she was unhappy. And look, I understand two viewpoints that, like, for a long time with Sunderland, there's been a lot of people who, there's been a lack of leadership. And I agree with Charlie on that, that for a long time across the club, and I don't just mean in that area, and there's a reason we fell down division after division. They've been almost leaderless. So I understand him wanting to be ruthless, but I'll be honest, when that came across, it was like I watched it and kind of went, "Oh no, like that's not good," because you just don't speak to people like that, woman, man, whatever. You just don't speak to people like that. In my personal opinion, people can disagree with that, but I think what's wrangled a lot of Sunderland fans with that was that particular game was the record-breaking attendance. But what Netflix haven't done, um, in that particular game, we did a thing called the gift of Christmas or something like that, and it was an idea where fans who were maybe had a bit more money in their pocket could buy a ticket and donate it to people who were like less privileged.
Oh, lovely.
So we have the Foundational Light, which I think there's a couple of maybe underprivileged or not from kids, maybe not as affable or something like that, or just families. And people bought tickets, like people with a bit more money, a bit more cash in their pocket could say, look, there's 20 tickets, donate them to this charity, that charity. And someone distributed it out between a lot of local charities for kids and families who just couldn't make the game normally, and thought, you know what, go and enjoy your day. At the Stadium Light, because you normally can't. It's 20 quid a ticket, which doesn't seem much, but it's a lot for some families. Sometimes that's what they have to eat on. So I'm a bit frustrated, and I think a lot of Sunderland fans are frustrated. Not that I'm any spokesman, just kind of what I'm reading online. They've been a bit frustrated that that wasn't portrayed, because that was a big push, and it was facilitated by our SLO, Chris Waters, who is in the first episode, the guy with the glasses, one of the nicest guys on the planet. Like, we've got the best SLO on the planet. Like, he's a great guy, and
Is he
I
the one who
know,
can't keep a straight face during the
yeah,
the
yeah,
Ibiza? Yeah, right.
when he's like, yeah, that's Chris. Because Chris is very smiley in general. He's a very smiley guy. Um, and like, I can almost feel, because I've had quite a few interactions with Chris, and he's, honestly, we have the best SLO on the planet. I love him to bits. He's such a lovely guy, and a lot of the push for tickets was facilitated by that. I'm sure it was called the Gift of Christmas or something like that. And I think it might have been about 3,000 tickets or something like that, which, we still would have broke the record without that. But it would have been nice if that was portrayed a little bit, because I don't think it shows anybody in a great light what actually happens in the TV show compared to what maybe actually was also happening in the background. I
That's
think
a
it would have
shame,
made,
isn't it?
yeah, it would have made just as good TV if you made an episode about the gift of giving tickets to people who are underprivileged. I wish they'd used that instead of maybe that bit at the start where people on like a Brexit march, the next episode or
Oh,
something. I wish they'd,
don't,
yeah,
no,
I know, I
no.
know.
Oh, God.
I wish they'd just used that instead. I wish they'd used that instead of like the Nigel Farage march, because Sunderland have that horrible narrative because we were the first people to vote Brexit, that people think we're all mad racists. We're not. We're really not. There's a million reasons, and I could do my whole own 24-hour podcast based on why that isn't the case. But it would have been nice if that showed the people of Sunderland what they did to get tickets to people who were underprivileged or not from African areas, or just simply couldn't afford a ticket, as opposed to being about like Charlie's push to get tickets, because it wasn't quite like that
No.
in my memory.
Brilliant. So we get to episode 4. Josh Madger's going to go to France. Now, I think you'll have quite a good take on this. And without slapping each other's back, you and I have both spoken to a lot of footballers, and I often think football fans don't get football agents, and they kind of universally dislike them, and they kind of don't really understand. But often, if you speak to footballers, they will say, my agent's great. The best thing you can do when you're young is get a good agent, etc. So the way this is painted in the documentary is that Madger collects his bags, leaves, doesn't accept the offer, doesn't say goodbye to anybody. I just always feel it's too easy to just have a pop at the agent.
Yeah,
I'd be interested in your view on this because obviously it's inherently bad practice to have your star young players contract go down to 1 year period. Even my club, Ipswich, when it gets to 1 year, there's always an option that the club can take. You know, Jared Bowen had for Hull, so he was worth
yeah.
a fortune, but they could trigger in the extra year to get that big fee out of West Ham. Just talk to me about that because I've seen a lot of stuff having a pop at Madger, and I sometimes think fans don't really get it from players and agents' points of view. And I'll probably be unpopular in the comments about that. But what's your view?
No, I know what you mean. I think, I mean, from the people I've spoke to, that you very rarely get someone who says like they hated their agent. Um, but watching it back from memory, because at the time, if I remember, we were relatively close with Stuart because he was doing podcasts and stuff like that then. Before we decided to stop doing them for a multitude of reasons. I think he did kind of do that. I think he did kind of leave everything to his agent and then one day just went, right, I'm off. Do I understand him going to Bordeaux above League One Sunderland? Absolutely. Of course I do. But what he's paying his agent to do a job, so he's paying him money to trust him to make the right decisions. And his fallback on that would be, well, I've signed for Bordeaux. I read a stat the other day. He's been involved in a goal every 91 minutes in Liga 1. So he would look at that and say, yeah, you might think, I should make decisions on my own career, but I pay my agent to make the right decisions. And if you look at what my agent's done for me, he's got it bang on. Sunderland are in League 1, didn't get promoted. I'm in the French top league and I'm involved in a goal every 91 minutes. And I'm 22 years old. So yeah, maybe it comes across bad, and that's maybe because we're football fans. And I think that's what I quite liked about Stuart was like he was hurt by that. And I was hurt by that watching it, and Sunderland fans will be hurt by that. And I think anyone who cares about football will be hurt by the fact that it happens in that way. But football is a job as much as we don't want to agree to it. We don't want to see it as that because we're also passionate about it. We're sitting here in the middle of a global pandemic talking about a transfer that happened a year ago. We're that passionate about it. We want to discuss it like all the time, and we want to watch Netflix shows, and we want to write about it, and we want to go to university to study it and all that kind of stuff. But in truth, it's like, hey, I love working for Middlesbrough Women, but if Rangers offered me double my wages, I'm going to go to Rangers. Hopefully Ben doesn't watch this, the chairman at Middlesbrough, and sack me. But
No,
but like
I just
it's
wanted
the
to
way it
put
is, isn't
it.
it?
I wanted to put it fairly because I do think the football fan is often agents evil without figuring it in, and it's not Stuart Donald's fault that he comes in with this guy a year left. He's in a no-win situation, So
Yeah, I think the Josh Madger thing a lot of the time was kind of the result of the previous mismanagement. Like, why are we letting a
absolutely.
player that because we got Madger from Man City's academy, I think, or Fulham's academy. He was one of them. We got him from one place. Like, so obviously he's highly rated. He played a few games in the championship. Didn't really do much in the championship, to be honest. But you don't let a player get to that point where he's got like a year left. We should have tied it down in the summer and gone, you know what? If your crap this season doesn't work out, you've only got you for a year and we'll still get summer.
Yeah, and what it does when you let that player get to that final year, it puts all the power into the player, ergo the agent's hands, doesn't
Yeah.
it? So there you go. Right, here comes the Will Grigg show then, and we saw this on the Leeds United Amazon documentary that an entire episode is pretty much transfer deadline day. They absolutely love it.
Yeah.
The way the way that this reads and the way this is presented, and maybe you'll tell me different, is that Stuart Donald is very happy for the cameras to see him taking this calculated gamble, which is way over budget for what he wants on what he should do. Maybe so that if Will Grigg scores 10 goals and fires you to second place, he's the hero. Whereas the way it's played out, it looks very embarrassing, and it looks like Wigan well and truly pulled his pants down there.
Oh, they've just
What's your
done him.
view on that?
I think it speaks for itself, doesn't it? They just done him. I remember at the time we did a transfer window, transfer deadline day live podcast, and I do. To be fair to Stuart, I remember the panic because Madja had gone. We had Charlie White who'd been like continuously injured through most of the season, and at that point wasn't pulling up any trees at all. Like he's been classed as one of the biggest flops ever. He's kind of redeemed himself a little bit, if not completely, since then. But we were like, well, we can't just go for the rest of the season with only Charlie White because what if he does come to form, but then he gets injured and so on and so forth. I was going to say Raheem Sterling came in. That would have fixed it all.
There you go.
Keziah Sterling came in. And to be honest, no one knew who he was. Like that tends to happen with young lads. But we thought, well, he'd come from Spurs, young lad, 2021, he might be all right. But who's the striker we're actually going to get? And he was getting pelters on Twitter, to be fair to him, at that point. That won't be seen, but he was getting pelters on Twitter. That's it. The season's over. We haven't signed a striker. Season finished. We should have had someone tied up. And if I remember rightly, we actually had 3 or 4 people on Roker Report that day with the amount of rumours we had for strikers writing up like short 400-word reports because we were getting linked to strikers every 10 minutes. Like Freddie Ladapo was linked for a while. Sam Winnell.
Ellis Harrison.
Yeah, Ellis Harrison was linked. I think Caden Jackson was linked as well because he wasn't pulling any trees at Ipswich at that point. But everyone knew it was like Will Grigg that we wanted, but everyone sort of give up. And then out of nowhere, I got a text from someone who was working at Sky and was like, "Oh, yeah, the Will Grigg bid's been accepted at the like 100th time of asking." So we were buzzing. We were like, brilliant. Yeah, it makes sense if we get promoted, blah, blah, blah. So to be fair to Stuart, at the time, he was under a hell of a lot of pressure to bring somebody in. But there's a reason fans are fans, and there's a reason chairman are paid and managers are paid to make those calculated decisions and to decide if it's correct and decide if it's the right decision.
Graham,
to go
he's
for
getting
it.
a lot of advice. There's a phone call with Jack Ross to say he's not worth more than 1.25 million, and then the deal goes through at 3 million. And I forget who the other guy. It must be a money
Richard
man.
Hill.
Yeah, what's his position there?
It's Richard Hill, head of recruitment. Yeah.
So he's getting advice as well to say, look, don't do this at that price. They'll come down. Yeah. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah, I think there's a bit as well with John Marquis when we go for John Marquis and he goes, how much do you want for John Marquis? And Doncaster go 10 million. And he goes, well, tell him we'll go to 1.25 and that's it. And it's like, but like 10 million, when you quote someone 10 million for a League One striker, what that means is fuck off. You're not having him. And he took that bit of advice fine. He's like, no, balls to that, understandably. But then with Will Grigg, they keep going, nah. But they keep quoting him a price and keep on going back. I mean, I'll tell you one thing. It's taught me on Football Manager how to not keep chasing someone if they don't want to sell them. Because it is that point, isn't it? It's like, would they have been... there would have been a lot of backlash if he hadn't signed a striker. A hell of a lot of backlash if he hadn't signed a striker, to be honest. Like, I remember at the time it was really, really not good. Like, people were literally panicking, like, we're not going to go up. But he's got to make that decision, I suppose, of, do I spend 3 million with no promise of being promoted? And again, you see in that episode me questioning why Will Grigg. Why did you chase Will Grigg?
Yeah, let's go on to that, because this is where you appear in the episode. And actually holding their feet to the fire, you're looking him right in the eyes, aren't you? And saying, why Will Grigg? He doesn't fit into the system. Is this your guy or is this Jack Ross's guy? Just tell me, were you stitched up at all in that? Is that is that part of the conversation in context?
Not really. Um, Obviously it happened, and obviously I was absolutely raging, as you can tell by my death stare, as someone called it yesterday. I think that's just my anxious twitch. But that podcast and that conversation happened after the season ended. So the Netflix show almost makes it look like Will Grigg hadn't scored in 2 games, and I've gone, well, what are you doing here? That wasn't the case. We did the podcast with Stuart and Charlie 2 days after that playoff final defeat. Now, I don't know many people who've lost a playoff in the way that we did after we just lost at Wembley, after all the heartbreak we've had for seasons previous, and could go into a room with the two people that you feel are partly or largely responsible for that, and not feel as angry as maybe I did. But it's put in a place, because when I was in the preview last week, I went up and down episode 6, and I thought, they mustn't have used it. Fair enough, that's fine. No anxiety. I'm not in it. I'll be fine. And then my mate texted me, who also had the preview, and said, look, you're in episode 4. They've put it in around the time we've signed Will Grigg, which is kind of weird. But it wasn't really in context. But I suppose I'm not expert in editing yet, anyway. I think that maybe they wanted to put it in because you see Stuart saying how, to me, it was Jack Ross's man, and that's who he wanted. So he wanted to push the ball out for Jack, and it was all him.
But you
just before that,
fired back on that though, didn't you?
Quite a lot, yeah. And I think if you listen to the full podcast as well, it frustratingly for me, it looks like Charlie cuts me dead. Not the case. That went on for a little while afterwards, because I felt like I was put in that position at that time. We just lost in the playoffs. I was put in that position I was thankfully trusted to ask the right questions. And I think that's a really important question. And the point I was trying to get across was that they're paid to make decisions on who they should sign based on the scouting team and the manager and everyone involved in the club identifying that person to fit into the team. And what I wanted to ask is, why did you feel he was worth 3 million when you obviously haven't scouted him, because he's nothing like Josh Maja. He's the polar opposite, and he just doesn't fit into the team. Was Jack Ross that desperate for him, or has this been a mess up from the recruitment system? And if he'd gone, you know what, yeah, we should have maybe scouted a bit more, hopefully he'll come good. Still got another season, he's got a 2.5-year contract or whatever it may be. Yeah, that probably would have satisfied me, to be honest, and satisfied a lot of people, because you own your mistakes, and I think that's how we feel. But I think maybe they edited it in because of the way Stuart obviously chases him. You can see Stuart is the one chasing him. Jack Ross literally says, no, it's fine. And then he says to me, well, Jack Ross wanted him, almost like Jack Ross held him over like a fire, saying, if you don't sign Will Grigg, everyone's going to die.
Graham, from my point of view, and I'm not saying this because I'm your mate, but for 4 episodes, we've seen these incredibly rich men acting in a very unself-aware way, being mean to staff, etc. Then we see one of them make this gamble in front of cameras to be the big hero, and the narrative they're spinning is he's gambled and this guy's not scoring, he's not scoring. So I think a lot of the viewers would have seen you come in and go, what was that? And thought, oh, okay, maybe that's this heroic gamble guy, getting told a few home truths. So that was the way, and I'd tell you if I thought,
I hope so.
Otherwise. So
I have horrendous anxiety as a person in general. I think a lot of us do. My anxiety is really terrible, which is I really shouldn't be following a career in sports journalism with any level of anxiety, because
don't read Twitter,
it's just the worst thing to do. Yeah, just the worst thing to do, isn't it? But I'm quite pleased people have, because at the time when it happened, a few people said I was a little bit too rough. A few people said, no, you were unprofessional in the way you asked the questions. Not everyone. I felt it was like 60-40, thankfully in my favor. But since it's came out, a lot of people have openly said, I get why you asked that question now. And it makes sense, because obviously Jack Ross wasn't as desperate as it sounded to sign him. But yeah, I mean, you know what? I'm only a man. I've only got an ego. I'm pleased people realize I asked the right questions. But I only asked that because I care about Sunderland.
Brilliant.
I bleed red and white, and I think if you see something wrong at your club, you're right to point it out. And I think you always should across every club. If you see something going wrong, you should call it out. And I, I, I dislike Newcastle in many ways, but the one way I will admire them is that they don't really deal with shit. Like they kind of point it out, and people laugh at them and stuff like that, included myself, when they have boycotts and they don't realize how lucky they are to be sitting 10th or whatever in the Premier League. But you've got to admire fans, I
with
think.
your ex-manager, yeah.
Cushion face Steve Bruce. Lovely man.
So, Graham, just incredible insight right from the horse's mouth there. Absolutely, absolutely love it. So if episode 4 is the Will Grigg kind of narrative episode, we move on to episode 5. I think you've dealt with the weird Brexit scene. I wrote down, don't know what Netflix are getting at with this, and I think we'll just move on from that.
I'm happy to. Yeah.
This episode's all about the EFL trophy. Just tell me quickly, is that Ellis Short in the box behind? What's he doing there?
I think he was still like friends with Charlie and Stuart, and a lot of people don't have the greatest opinion of Ellis Short because things kind of literally burned to the ground under him. But I think Ellis Short genuinely cared about Sunderland. I think, and again, it could be another 24-hour podcast of the things that he did wrong and the wrong people that he appointed. But I never would question Ellis Short's desire to get it right. The amount of money that billionaire pumped into the club. I mean, 12 million on Stephen Fletcher, like 5 million on Danny Graham, and he got no return on players like that. And the stuff that the money that he ploughed in, and it just didn't work. He just, in my opinion, and I can only speak in my opinion, employed the wrong people.
We have, Graham, we have a similar thing with Marcus Evans, where one of my colleagues, Joe, said Marcus Evans is not a bad owner; he is a hapless owner who just has made a litany of bad decisions, and Roy Keane and Paul Jewell and Paul Hurst and things of that nature. So we go through the first Wembley trip of the season, and you lose on penalties. 85,000 in there. Ellis Short up in the box. Lots of close-ups in the stands with the fans. Good TV, I think. Obviously, not the result for Sunderland. Let's come on to the last episode, because we get this 5-4 home defeat. Tom Flanagan, who just seems like a sort of innocent young chap, talking about going to Tesco with his wife and getting called out. And then you start to get the owners. I felt uncomfortable with this. You start to get the owners on camera putting the boot in to Jack Ross and the tactics and the team, and we get it just amazed me. I sit on the terraces, and I do a lot of games as a neutral, watching championship teams now which aren't there anymore, and you just hear, no offense to, I love football fans, you hear a lot of crap, get it forward, get another striker on, and we're seeing your owners on camera get it forward, the striker's too isolated, get another striker on. Talk to me about them kind of showing that fan level naivety, and talk to me about calling Jack Ross out on camera.
I felt like that was happening for a while. And this was around the time I started questioning Jack Ross, if I'm completely honest with you, because we went through a stage last season where we'd go 1-0 up and then just sit back or just hope Aidan McGeady did something, which, to be honest, to be fair to him, he did a lot of the time. You know what? I don't mind them saying it as they see it, but I suppose, and again, it's only my opinion, I would not want them to act like a fan in the boardroom. Like, which
we see in episode 4, don't
we? Yeah, it's like, to me, like, if I'm speaking as a fan, I can speak quite freely. But, like, for example, I work for Middlesbrough. If we get beat, I'm not going to come out and start, like, doing interviews with the players and say, why are you so terrible today? Or, like, on camera, I'm not going to, I have my own opinions, but there has to be a level of, I think, professionalism. Man to man in private, do I mind them having their own opinions? Not really. Especially if they're saying it as they see it, because that's passionate football fans. But there's a big reason why I don't own a football club, and you don't own a football club, because we'd probably make emotional decisions. And I think a lot of the time, Stuart and Charlie made a lot of decisions based on the emotion, didn't they? And you can see it. But it is quite funny though when he just goes, change it, and his wife's like, sit down, honey, sit down. I
She's
just think
totally right, isn't
good
she?
TV.
Yeah, it
She's
is
so right.
great TV, isn't it? But yeah, just flabbergasted. I did a video earlier in the season, the 10 dumbest things you hear from the terraces every, he took the
There's a
ball,
lot,
ref, get it forward, get two on up front, all of that stuff. And
so much stuff.
yeah, Charlie said all of that stuff, didn't he?
4-4-2.
Exactly, because
Yeah,
two strikers is always better than one, isn't it? Don't start me on that, Graham. Don't start me. So we get up to the end of the season, playoffs. It's Pompey again. Bit of fun and games, some handbags, and the flare drop down. Through they go. They edit the second leg like it's a bit of a survival cling on the 0-0 at Fratton Park. Is that the case? And what's your view on Stuart Donald just itching to be filmed in with the supporters, Mike Ashley style, over there?
that's how I felt. I felt watching it a bit. This is Mike Ashley downing a pint, isn't it? Like
Mm.
in 2008 or whenever it was he took over. I don't think he's as bad as a person as Mike Ashley. Again, that's my opinion. That's not fact. But I think he's a nice bloke that is genuinely a fan, and I think he's got so invested in something that it actually hurts him. You can see it. Like there's that bit when he goes, "This football club's going to kill me," and he says it like he believes it. Like he says it like he believes it. He doesn't say it like in a jokey way, like, "Oh, it's going to kill me." He's just like, "This is going to kill me," and it's just like you can feel it in him. And but the Pompey game was. Do you know what really frustrated me about the Portsmouth game? They edited out Luke O'Nien getting like filled in by that ogre-looking guy. Do you remember when he fell over the bollards and that like ogre-looking bloke
Oh
like kicked him in
yes,
the back? They
the
didn't show it.
yeah, and
And Lee
and
Cattermole
Lee
like took about
Catamol
600 Pompey fans on.
and was it Grant Ledbetter's
Max
father
Power.
had passed away, and they didn't show.
Yeah,
That was like the most emotional thing I saw on
it
Twitter.
was.
Catamol hugging him, and I thought they were bound to show that. I don't want to sound like I'm sensationalizing somebody's personal tragedy, but I was
No, but it was. There's a lot of things you could put in there that would have been nice TV. I mean, Grant Sunderland through and through as well. Like talking about Sunderland till I die. If you
Ipswich,
want to pick that team out,
yeah.
yeah. And Grant is. I mean, I'll tell you a funny story about Grant Ledbetter. I remember. Unfortunately, we lost the Derby 5-1 as it was, but I went to St James's Park for that game when Kevin Nolan and all that's good. I got to the pub at about 20 past 8 in the morning, and he was on the tables. He'd been playing for Ipswich the previous day, singing like Sunderland songs on the table. Grant Ledbetter's Sunderland through and through, and I'm a bit disappointed they didn't even put his return. And I know it hasn't worked out for everyone on the playing pitch. Ledbetter coming back for us, it hasn't at all. But him coming back was like there was some really lovely moments on our social media of him walking back in the stadium and just being like, "I'm back." And if you're talking a TV series called Sunderland Till I Die, and Grant Ledbetter, who literally bleeds red and white, hasn't got any part in that, and that was a shame not to see Grant Ledbetter in that a little bit more, because he's a man of few words, but he's a bloody good bloke.
Interesting. We get to the playoff final. There's some nice 1998 callbacks, which we mentioned at the top of the show. Sorry, it always goes down as the greatest
Yeah, it was
playoff
amazing.
final,
It was
doesn't
amazing.
it? And
Yeah.
I was at this game, Graham. I did this game for my YouTube channel. I'm afraid I was in with the Charlton fans. I couldn't get a ticket in with the Sunderland fans. It was much easier to get in the Charlton end, as you can imagine, with the size of the two supports.
For sure.
And everything you've said about sitting back on a lead, and I I hate to say it, I sat there, and this may be really unfair because I saw didn't go to extra time, did it? It was full time, wasn't it?
No.
Yeah. So I saw
Last 4 seconds of injury time they scored
yeah,
in. Yeah.
I saw 90 minutes of Sunderland that season, and I sat there and I thought, oh, year two parachute payment, Jack Ross, lots of experienced players, 4 million quid striker in January. Is this what you've built over this year? Is that all? Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very fair. I think, I mean, if you look at the team then, that day it was McLaughlin in goal, Scottish international, Luke at right back, Brian Oviedo, Premier League player, literally 2 seasons ago. I think Ozturk was at the back with Flannel, and then your midfield was Power, Catamol, and
Leadbitter.
George Honeyman. Ledbetter, that's right. Yeah, Ledbetter, Max Power, and Ledbetter, Max Power, and Catamol, Honeyman, and well, McGeady was injured, so I think he played Gooch, and then you had Charlie Wyke up front. And for a League One team, it's a pretty good team. But the way that we scored was just perfect, like in the
I didn't even see
weirdest
it. I
way.
was writing something
Same.
down. Yeah.
We didn't celebrate. Like I was with it was mine and my girlfriend's first date that, which really was a weird first date. And when it went in, we all kind of went, "There's people celebrating something. What's happened? Is there another game on or something?" And then the scoreboard changed to 1-0, and we went, "What?" And then like someone went, "Lads, we've scored," and we were like, "What do you mean we've scored?" And someone got the video on Twitter, and we were like, so we were like robbed of the celebration because
They
it
got
just
reception in
no one knew
Wembley.
it happened. Slight reception. It was like buffering. Like you could see it
And
sort of going
it's
across the line.
sponsored by EE everywhere, and you can't get bloody reception in there, can you?
You just do
Absolute.
that. You do that thing, don't you? Where you go change it to 3G, change it to 3G, you'll be all right. But yeah, it was just the story of the second. That's what I mean about Charlie. It's hard to disagree with him because from a fan's perspective, he was right in what he was saying. We did sit back that second half of the season, and that's where a lot of people's frustrations came with Jack Ross. Jack Ross probably got more stick than he probably deserved, from me included. But but yeah, it was. It felt like when you took because Aidan McGeady was injured that game. Aidan McGeady had a broken foot for like the last 2 months, so he had like an injection and came on in like the last 15 minutes. And you can probably remember the Sunderland fans like lifting when McGeady
I
came on
do.
because we knew that was our magic touch. That was our guy that could that was the man that could do the things that would win you league or win you a playoff final. The rest of the team, all right, especially Cats. Like I love Cats, but I think we all expected a bit more from that team because we'd lost. We lost against Fleetwood and we lost against Southend the last 2 games of the season as well. So the end of the season wasn't a great deal of form. And then we beat Portsmouth, played well then, got a really good battle and draw, and then got the final, got the perfect start gifted to us, and then sat back.
Mm.
Yeah, it really still rankles. Like watching it back, a lot of us kind of are gutted, but at the same time, you just think, you know what? If you just pushed forward and just actually tried to take Charlton on, we might be up. But it's Sunderland at Wembley. We just don't win at Wembley.
No. There's a bit of a feeling that the documentary ends a little bit abruptly. Obviously, there's not a good story to tell. There's a bit with the kit man at the end.
Cookie. Yeah.
But just talk to me about this. For Sunderland, is this documentary, is it a net positive or an own goal for you personally being on it? And do you think more people are watching it because of the lockdown?
Yeah, I think so. I think people are like literally starved of football, aren't they? So they'll watch sort of anything. There's a lot of teams in League One that think there's a rivalry with us now. Coventry for some reason, Portsmouth for some reason, some clubs that for some reason like to see Sunderland suffer, which I don't know why, and sort of revel in it. And again, I go back to the fact that where's your Netflix series? I don't know. It depends how we look at it, really. The first season got a bunch of billionaires from America interested in us, which, again, is another long story that didn't quite work out the way any of us would have liked it to have worked out. So it kind of attract people to the club and the fans because you do see a lot of the stuff in the second season about the fans. Like a lot of the end of it, when there's people crying and getting upset, yeah, we might get a bit of jip about that. So you crying on Netflix and stuff like that. But like that's because we care. That's because like it's Sunderland. Sunderland AFC is the hub of the city. It's the most important thing that exists, and pretty much if someone doesn't like football in Sunderland, you give them a really weird look. And you can sort of if you've got money and you've got nous and you've got business sense and you want to have a really good project that can really fulfill you, Sunderland's definitely a sleeping giant. But does it rankle a little bit when people take the mick out of us for it? Yeah, a little bit. Me being in it personally, yeah, I came across all right. So I've been told. So incredibly anxious about going out because that's just me. But now that came out and people think I did all right on it, and people think I held people to task for the right reasons. Yeah, that's all right by me. I'll tell you when I have a job at somewhere like Rangers or like Barcelona. I'll tell you if it hindered me then.
Yeah, there you go, there you go.
But
A-
yeah, it's I think
and just quickly, Graham, these main protagonists, just tell us quickly what's become of Stuart Donald, Charlie Methven, and Will Grigg.
uh, Will Grigg still hasn't reached double figures. Do you know when he says if I get to 10 goals by the end of the season? Still hasn't. Um, with well, Charlie's left, but he still has a stake in the club. So he still has 6% in the club, but he's not a director or anything. And uh, I think a few things happened where Charlie just decided it would be best to maybe leave. I don't know. I don't know enough personally, but I think he made the decision to leave based on probably a few things that's probably happened. And I think Sunderland is a full-time job and he's got a family. So I think he left for that reason. Stewart's still there, but desperately trying to sell if what we read is correct. But we've had two takeover bids or alleged takeover bids. So we've been told one was by Mark Campbell, who ended up that didn't happen. I don't know why or what happened with it. There's numerous rumours, but it depends which one you believe. And then we had the Michael Dell based consortium that tried to buy it from him. But things have kind of gone a bit sour. There was a big Donald out campaign between all the fanzines, and not everyone was on board with it. A good amount of people, like 80,000 people, I think, signed up to the whatever it was that I think the fanzines did at the time, saying that Stuart Donald is not the right man to take the club forward. Do I think after watching the documentary it's going to endear Charlie or Stuart to the fan base and make them think actually that's the right person? No, I don't think so. I think I wish Stuart well, very much so, because I think he is a nice guy, and in my dealings with him, a very, very lovely person. But I think now would be the right time to sell to someone with millions and billions and trillions of pounds that likes to waste their money on a League One football club.
I dare say I think most impartial observers will see the Sunderland fans as the straight man and Donald and Methven as the comedy duo, and they're the self-aware ones, and maybe someone else. Graham, I know we've gone ages. You're right to just quickly do a couple of Twitter questions.
Sure, yeah,
Yeah.
of course I can. I'll try.
This is at Alice in Chef. Max Power's penis, intentional inclusion or not? Is Max Power's nether regions in this documentary?
It is.
Please don't tell me where. I don't want to see it.
It's during the Wembley scene, I think. He's holding the flag up. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna guess not intentional, but I can't believe they missed it. But Max is a good lad. Max is all right. Just a bit daft, isn't he? Bless him.
Yeah, we've got some unwanted Newcastle banter in there, which I will ignore. The Grigg transfer, classic panic buy that didn't work, forced on a club by a dubious agent. Can you remember players or agents having anywhere near as much power when there was a 12-month market? Do you think the January window plays into that type of disaster?
Yeah, I remember the 12 month because I'm that age now. Yeah, I think it does. I think the January window's naturally a difficult place to maneuver, isn't it? And I think when you're talking the last 2 or 3 hours of a transfer window and you're getting held over a barrel for Will Grigg and you're spending like money on Will Grigg Will Grigg cost about 7 times the amount that Kevin Phillips did. And I know there's a big age gap, but yeah, you know what? I understand the January transfer window, but like I wouldn't mind it going back to how it used to be because the first ever not January transfer window, the first ever summer transfer window I remember, we spent a lot of money on Andre Flo, which again didn't work out either. So Sunderland and transfer windows don't really work out. So yeah, if we could have the 12-month one, that would be much more preferred.
This is Ian. I think this is to me. It says, as a non-Sunderland fan, has this series changed your thoughts about the club and its fans? No, not really. I think having spoken to you, I think I get Sunderland. I think I get their fans, and having seen the first season and listened to shows and recorded shows with you. No, I think, and most football fans do kind of get Sunderland and that sort of northeast area of football without sounding too cocky. There's one more in here about Wilgrig. I think we'll leave that. Graham, absolutely brilliant. As we said, you're not with the Roker Report anymore, but you still have a podcast. Do you want to give it a little plug here, and what can we expect?
I'd love to, yeah. So love my time with Local Report. Incredibly thankful for all the opportunities that they give me. But without blowing smoke up my own backside, I think once you've interviewed Niall Quinn and Kevin Phillips, your ceiling at who you can interview with Sunderland is kind of hit. It's kind of like I've interviewed Quinny and Phillips, right? Where do I go now? All right, the only ones that are even close to them are probably dead, unfortunately. And I was really lucky that my last interview I did with Local Report was with Bobby Kerr, obviously 73 Cup final winner, who absolutely rinsed my haircut, hence why I'm wearing a hat today, because he's made me very anxious about it.
Don't
but
worry,
I decided to go.
It's never happened to me on Twitter. Don't worry at all.
Tried,
Yeah.
tried to cut my own hair, and I don't know if I've done a good job yet, so that's why the hat there, if I'm honest. But with the podcast that I did, obviously my surname's Falk, Falk. I wanted to just interview other people about other clubs as well. I do a podcast called What the Falk. I'm 3 episodes deep, but I've recorded about 8. So the first 3 episodes, the first one's with Beth Mead. Obviously, I'm involved in women's football. I love women's football, and Beth is like box office in terms of lionesses. Then I interviewed Yunus Kabul about his time at Sunderland, because I want to do Sunderland specials because that is kind of my audience, so that makes sense. You'll understand that with obviously Blue Monday and what you do, but obviously you still got to do a bit of Ipswich because that's your passion. But I just wanted to have more of a ceiling to interview other people. So my podcast is What the Falk. It's available on Spotify. It's available on YouTube. It's available on Podbean and iTunes. You've got Beth Mead, Yunus Kabul, and Chris Burke, who's brilliant, former Rangers player.
I did a video. I must interrupt you quickly. I did a video recently. The 11 players to score 4 goals in Championship games. There's only 11, and would you believe 3 of them involved Chris Burke assists? He was all over it for Michael Chopra for Cardiff, for Zigic for Birmingham, and for Lingard for Birmingham as well. Never understood why he couldn't get to the Premier League.
I mean, I think from the podcast made a couple of moves to clubs that were like ready to go there, and it just didn't quite happen. But really great lad, really good stories about Rangers. Some really good stories about his growing up in Glasgow, which is obviously where he used to live and plan to go back to at some point. But I have Danny Higginbotham coming up on Saturday, and then talking about Sunderland Till I Die, I have got Kit Simons already recorded about Sunderland Till I Die 1. It sounds like I wanted to go away from Sunderland. It sounds like I'm just doing Sunderland here, but I promise you there's other ones. If you're a Stoke fan, the Danny Higginbotham one's very much about Stoke, and I've just interviewed, before I spoke to yourself, Carl Dickinson, former Portsmouth, Stoke, and that was another great chat. And
any chance of our mate Mr. Waghorn making an appearance any point?
Well, I did text him the other week, asking him if he had any old firm tickets kicking about from any of his old Rangers pals, and if I'm honest with you, I got completely blanked. So no, I'm nervous to text him these days. But yeah, but school friends, once they get money, they just forget the little. No, Martin's he's a lovely lad. But I hope so. I hope so. Fingers crossed. But yeah, I found out the SPL tends to have the best stories. So if you're a Scottish football fan, there's going to be some good ones coming up.
Awesome.
Hopefully.
So What the Falk, Falk, just tap that into your podcast. Graham, it's 9:41 at night. You've been amazingly generous with your time. And I will say to everybody, even if you don't watch the whole series, so episode 4, about two-thirds of the way in, tough tattooed guy behind the desk there. Absolutely, absolutely brilliant. Love it. Graham, thank you so much,
You're welcome.
and speak soon.
Yeah, speak soon, mate. Thank you.